Why did everyone suddenly go silent at the checkpoint? The hum of the scanners, the clipped conversations, the faint shuffle of uniforms, all of it seemed to stop the moment her badge failed to beep. For an instant, even the air between the walls felt tense, like it knew something she didn't want it to know. Maya Chen didn't flinch. She never did. Her expression was the same calm mask she'd worn through war zones, black sites, and windowless rooms where truth was currency and silence was survival. To anyone watching, she was just another civilian contractor. Late 30s, gray pantsuit, plain leather briefcase, no jewelry, no statement to make. But behind her still eyes, her mind was already counting. 3 officers within reach. 1 armed. 2 cameras facing the west entrance. And the scanner light, blinking red instead of green. The security officer frowned. This isn't processing correctly. His voice was flat, routine, the kind of tone used when the system hiccups, except this wasn't a hiccup. It was the beginning of exposure. Maya tilted her head slightly, calm but alert. Is there a problem? Her voice was quiet, professional, with a trace of curiosity that didn't quite hide calculation. The officer didn't answer. He scanned the badge again, and again. The same error tone filled the air, sharp, cold, final. He sighed, rubbing his temple. Badge won't read, happens sometimes. When was this issued? 3 weeks ago, building security office, 2nd floor. His colleague leaned closer, a younger woman with alert eyes, sharp voice, and sharper instincts. Officer Wolf. She took the badge, holding it to the light like she was inspecting a suspect rather than an ID. Her frown deepened. The hologram's off-center, about 2 millimeters. That's not a printing defect, that's forgery work. The words forgery work cut through the quiet like a blade. Several people in line turned their heads. A businessman checked his watch. A Navy officer frowned, trying to see what was happening. And still, Maya didn't move. "Ma'am," the senior officer said, his tone suddenly cold. "I'm going to need you to step aside." Maya nodded once, her eyes never leaving the badge. Of course. She followed as a 3rd officer approached, broad shoulders, military cut, hand resting near his holster. The kind of man trained to project authority, not use it. They guided her toward a smaller screening area cordoned off with retractable belts, out of the main flow of traffic. "This is a high-security facility," Officer Wolf said, her voice tight. "Attempting to enter with false credentials is a federal offense." Maya met her gaze without hesitation. "My credentials are authentic." "Then why don't they scan properly?" "Perhaps your system needs updating." The subtle challenge in her tone made Wolf pause. It wasn't defiance. It was the confidence of someone who knew she was right, and that knowledge unsettled them more than a confession ever could. "Empty your briefcase," the older officer ordered, snapping on latex gloves as if preparing for surgery. Maya complied without protest. Laptop, manila folders, pens, breath mints, half-empty water bottle, notebook. Everything ordinary, too ordinary. The officer checked her laptop, password protected. The folders, budget reports, meeting schedules, all dull, plausible, and meaningless. "These could belong to anyone," he muttered. "They belong to me." Wolf crossed her arms. "Who are you really, ma'am?" "Maya Chen, civilian contractor, Defense Intelligence Agency." "Really?" Wolf raised an eyebrow. "Then tell me your supervisor's name." "That information is compartmented." The word compartmented hung in the air. It wasn't one civilians used lightly, not here. The crowd nearby started murmuring. Someone whispered, "Did she just say DIA?" Wolf's jaw tightened. "We deal with classified personnel every day, ma'am. They have proper credentials." "My credentials are proper. Your scanner isn't designed to read them. Or they're expertly forged." Maya didn't blink, but her mind was running through contingencies: escape, concealment, recovery. She could feel the weight of eyes on her, the rhythm of suspicion building. The story was unfolding too fast, and she couldn't control it. "I need to make a phone call," she said finally. "To who? Your accomplice?" the officer sneered. He reached for her phone. "This will be confiscated as evidence." Evidence? The word stung more than she expected. Evidence of what? Of being the wrong kind of invisible. "Call counterintelligence," Wolf ordered. "We've got a potential breach." A nearby officer raised his radio, but before he could speak, a voice from the crowd interrupted. "Excuse me," said a Navy lieutenant stepping forward. "Is there a problem here?" "Sir, please return to the main line," the officer replied automatically. But the lieutenant ignored him. His eyes locked on Maya, recognition flickering behind his calm demeanor. "I've seen you before," he said slowly. "Last year at the briefing on." He stopped, his face shifted. Realization, fear, understanding. Maya's voice came quiet but firm. "It's fine, Lieutenant, let them proceed." He hesitated, then stepped back. But the interruption was enough. Others noticed. A man in an expensive suit, silver hair, congressional pin moved closer. "Excuse me," he said with authority. "I'm Congressman Aldrich. Are these officers treating you appropriately?" Maya's voice was polite. "They're following security protocols, sir." "Protocols that involve calling a civilian contractor a forger?" Aldrich asked, his southern drawl sharpening. "That seems excessive." Wolf straightened. "Congressman, with respect, her badge doesn't scan and the hologram's inconsistent." "Have you verified her identity through alternate means?" Aldrich asked. "We're in the process." "Because from where I stand," Aldrich said evenly, "it looks like you decided she's guilty and are working backward to prove it." The checkpoint had stopped functioning entirely. The line of people was now a crowd, silent, watching. Then the sound of boots, measured, heavy, commanding. A woman approached in Navy uniform, Commander Stripes, Vega. Her presence shifted the air, authority in motion. "What's going on here?" she asked. "Possible false credentials, ma'am," the officer said. "Badge won't read." Vega held out her hand. "Let me see it." She studied the badge under the light. Her eyes lingered longer than anyone else's had. Then she looked at Maya, really looked. Something in her expression softened, not recognition but understanding. "Have you run her name through JPS?" Vega asked quietly. The officer nodded, handing her a tablet. "Yes, ma'am. It's showing Maya Chen, but the clearance level looks wrong." "What kind of wrong?" "It's showing a level that doesn't exist in the standard structure." Vega leaned closer, scanning the data. "What code?" "SAP Legacy 9, ma'am." The words hit the room like static. Even those who didn't understand them felt the tension shift. Legacy 9 wasn't supposed to exist. Vega stepped back, then pulled out her phone. Her tone dropped to a whisper. 30 seconds later, she returned, her entire bearing transformed. "Officers," she said firmly, "return Miss Chen's belongings immediately." The officer blinked. "Ma'am, that's an order." Vega's voice was sharp enough to cut steel. "Her credentials are authentic. They're not meant to scan on standard equipment." Wolf's certainty wavered. "Commander, we were just following." "I know," Vega interrupted. "You did your job, now stand down." Then quietly, almost with regret, she said to Maya, "Your escort is being sent down." "That's not necessary." "It is now. You've been seen." The elevator chimed. And then he appeared. A man in his 60s, uniform perfect, posture unbreakable. Lieutenant General Marcus Stone. The moment he entered, the entire security area froze. Even the congressman stepped back instinctively. Stone's eyes locked on Maya. "Miss Chen," he said, his voice a command wrapped in apology. "General," she answered. He turned to the officers. You detain one of my people because her badge didn't scan. Sir, we followed standard protocol. Standard protocol, Stone repeated quietly. Let me explain something. His tone didn't rise. It didn't need to. Every word carried weight. There are clearances in this building that don't appear in any manual you've read. Credentials deliberately built not to scan, because their existence isn't supposed to be verified by you. He paused, his gaze moving from one face to another. Miss Chen holds Level 9 clearance under a Special Access Legacy program. There are fewer than 20 individuals with that designation in the entire Department of Defense. Her work is beyond your clearance to understand. Silence. The officers looked pale. Wolf stared at the ground. Hastings swallowed hard. You've created a significant operational problem, Stone continued. Every person who saw this interaction will now need to be logged, briefed, and cleared. Every camera feed reviewed. Every rumor silenced. He turned to Vega. Status. Containment initiated, sir. Good, make sure it stays that way. Then to Maya, softer now. Shall we? She nodded once. As the elevator doors closed behind them, the chaos outside felt distant, unreal. Stone's jaw tightened. This is exactly why I opposed the new scanner system. Maya looked straight ahead. It served its purpose. Anyone trying to clone my credentials would face the same issue. The error proves authenticity. He exhaled sharply. It also exposed you to 50 people. 43, she corrected. Only 5 saw my face clearly. He glanced at her, the faintest smile, half frustration, half admiration. Still counting. Always. The elevator ascended, to floors not listed on any directory, where names disappeared into silence and decisions shaped nations. And for the first time that morning, Maya allowed herself to breathe. Not relief, just readiness. Because this, the misunderstanding, the exposure, the quiet apology from a general, was just another kind of battlefield. Only this one didn't leave scars you could see. Why did silence always feel heavier up here? The elevator doors slid open without a sound, like the building itself was holding its breath. No signs, no windows, just polished floors, muted lights, and corridors that didn't exist on any blueprint. Only those who belonged here would know what the silence meant. Maya did. She built her career in its echoes. General Stone walked ahead, his pace steady. His presence alone felt like security clearance, the kind that didn't need codes or scanners. He didn't speak until they passed the 3rd checkpoint: retinal scan, biometric signature, encrypted badge. Each door hissed open like a whisper of trust. When they finally reached the end of the hall, the general stopped. Briefing been moved up, he said. How soon? Now. Maya nodded, her hand tightening around the worn handle of her briefcase. She carried it for 7 years through continents and crises. To everyone else, it was leather and stitching. To her, it was memory, a reminder of who she used to be before Level 9. They entered the secure conference room. No one greeted her. No one needed to. 5 senior officials sat around an oval table: generals, admirals, one civilian whose expression said he'd forgotten how to sleep. The screens around them glowed with encrypted feeds, satellite imagery, intercepted communications, blacked-out lines of text. Stone gestured for her to sit. Maya opened her laptop, connected through a secure fiber line, and began pulling up classified data like a pianist rehearsing a piece she'd written herself. For the next 2 hours, the world outside ceased to exist. She spoke softly, precisely. Her analysis mapped invisible lines across continents, covert resource channels, encrypted money trails, silent partnerships between nations that swore they didn't talk. Her words carried no ego, only clarity. And if this pattern holds, she concluded, you'll see coordinated activity across 3 sectors within the month. That's not coincidence. That's orchestration. The room stayed quiet. Finally, the Secretary of Defense, a man known for never complimenting anyone, spoke. "Outstanding work, Ms. Chen." Maya inclined her head. "Thank you, sir." But inside she wasn't proud. She was tired. Tired of being the invisible mind behind decisions that changed things she'd never get to see. Tired of knowing that the closer she came to truth, the further she drifted from peace. When the meeting ended, the others filed out quickly, voices low, decisions already forming. Stone stayed behind. "You handled the checkpoint better than most would have," he said quietly. "They were doing their jobs," Maya replied, "just not equipped to understand mine." "That's generous of you." "It's accurate." Stone studied her. "You realize the exposure means we have to rotate you out for at least 6 months, remote only, no facility access." Maya didn't argue, understood. "You don't seem disappointed." She smiled faintly. "General, I've built systems designed to function without me in the room. I can operate from anywhere." Stone nodded, always thinking 3 moves ahead. "That's the job." As she left, she could feel the unspoken weight between them, a shared awareness that her kind of brilliance came at a cost neither could name. The Pentagon looked different at night. Colder, quieter. The kind of quiet that hid consequences. Maya exited through a lesser-used door, not the west entrance. Different exit, different credentials. She moved through the crowd like vapor, just another tired employee leaving a long day behind. But she didn't feel tired, she felt alert. That kind of alertness that comes after surviving exposure. Her heart still carried the echo of the morning. The stares, the suspicion, the congressman's confusion, Vega's apology, Stone's restrained fury. And beneath it all something else. Pride. Not in herself, but in the machine she served. A machine that, when it worked right, didn't need names, just trust. Her phone buzzed softly, an encrypted signal only one person could send. "Containment complete. All witnesses briefed and logged. Your cover remains intact." Stone. She read it twice, then deleted it. The city lights reflected off her windshield as she merged into the evening traffic, another commuter fading into anonymity. And that was the point. Anonymity was armor. She had learned that early, before the titles, before the secrets, before she became level 9. That night she dreamed of nothing which, for her, was rare. No missions, no echoes of the past. Just darkness. Peace in its purest and most unfamiliar form. It didn't last. Her secure phone buzzed at 5:47 a.m. "Chen," she answered, her voice still even. "It's Stone." Her spine straightened before he said the next words. "We have a situation. How soon can you reach Fort Meade?" 80 minutes. "Make it 60. There's been a breach at NSA. They found your name." For a heartbeat, she couldn't breathe. "Which files?" "Legacy protocols. Someone accessed the personnel list for special access programs, including yours." Her blood ran cold. "Understood, I'm on my way." The drive to Fort Meade was a blur of asphalt and rising dread. Every mile closer felt like a thread pulling tighter around her chest. By the time she entered the facility, the sky had shifted from pale gray to hard daylight, unforgiving, sterile. General Stone was already there, alongside Admiral Ortiz and Jonathan Webb from the FBI. The screens around them glowed with access logs and timelines. 17 minutes, Webb said grimly. Someone reviewed all 19 legacy personnel files. The access was logged under Colonel Sarah's credentials. "She's in Germany," Maya said flatly. "Exactly." Her fingers hovered above the keyboard. "What else did they pull?" "Only legacy personnel data. Nothing operational. Maya's eyes narrowed. Then they're building a list, not stealing intel, hunting. The room went still. No one spoke for several seconds. The checkpoint, she said finally. 6 weeks ago, any chance it's connected? Stone looked at her sharply. How? If someone accessed the Pentagon's security footage afterward, they could have seen me detained. If they knew what to look for. Her voice trailed off as she began typing. Her mind ran faster than her hands, tracing digital fingerprints across layers of obfuscation. Proxy servers, spoofed IPs, false foreign markers. This isn't foreign, she murmured. It's too clean, too familiar. Someone wants us to think it's overseas. Domestic, Webb asked. She nodded, definitely. Hours passed in a haze of code, data, and silence. By evening, she had a trace. A location. Crystal City, she said. Defense contractor hub, Meridian Strategic Solutions. Stone frowned. You're sure? As sure as anyone can be without knocking on the door. She closed the laptop, her voice steady again. Let's draw them out. Meaning, Webb asked. Use me as bait, leak that I'm returning to the Pentagon tomorrow, let them track me. Stone hesitated. That's reckless. So is waiting. After a moment he nodded. Do it. The next morning, Maya dressed in the same gray suit. Same briefcase. Different purpose. As she approached the checkpoint, the same one that had once detained her, every motion felt deliberate, like walking through memory. She could sense the eyes of unseen watchers. Her earpiece crackled softly with Webb's voice. We have activity. Crystal City nodes live. They're accessing Pentagon feeds, tracking your movement. Let them, Maya whispered. She moved past the scanners. This time the badge beeped green. She almost smiled. Minutes later, Webb's voice came sharp. We've got them. Office 412, Meridian Strategic. Within 20 minutes, a team breached the site. Dr. Rachel Kincaid, former NSA analyst turned contractor, was in custody. She'd been selling access. And the Legacy 9 list was her next delivery. When the confirmation came through, Maya exhaled, slow, controlled but real. Stone turned to her. Outstanding work. She met his gaze. Just cleaning up my own mess. He shook his head. No, you turned exposure into advantage again. That night, driving home in silence, she thought about the strange paradox of her life. To be invisible, yet constantly watched. To protect secrets, yet live as one. Some people fought wars with weapons. She fought them with silence. And in that silence, she'd found something almost sacred. The understanding that the most loyal acts rarely came with recognition. That sometimes dignity didn't speak, it simply acted. The city lights blurred past her windshield like memories dissolving into the night. And for the first time in a long while, Maya Chen allowed herself to feel something like peace. Not because the danger was gone, but because she had faced it and still chosen restraint over power. In her world, that was the bravest thing anyone could do. How do you return to normal when your life isn't supposed to exist? That was the question that haunted her after the breach, after the capture, after the long days of investigation. Maya Chen sat in a room without windows, staring at a blank screen that held classified reports only she could decrypt. 6 weeks had passed since Dr. Rachel Kincaid's arrest. The world had already moved on. But in her world, nothing ever really ended. The quiet hum of air conditioning filled the secure office. Her reflection in the black monitor looked older somehow, sharper at the edges. Exposure changed people in this business, not just how others saw you, but how you saw yourself. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard, frozen mid-thought. She wasn't tired, not physically. It was a deeper fatigue, the kind that settled behind the ribs and made every breath feel deliberate. Behind her, the door opened with a soft click. General Stone entered, expression unreadable. "Still here," he said, not a question. "Still working," Maya replied. He set a folder down beside her. "CIA's expanded the breach investigation," he said. "Kincaid wasn't acting alone." Maya's eyes flicked toward the folder. "How big?" "Bigger than we thought, maybe 5 others, contractors mostly." She leaned back in her chair. So that was it. The exposure hadn't ended anything. It had simply revealed how much deeper the shadows ran. Stone studied her quietly. "You look like you haven't slept in days." "I sleep," she said softly. "I just don't dream." "That's not a strength, Maya. It's a necessity." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "You can't keep carrying this weight alone." She looked at him, calm but unyielding. "With respect, sir, that's exactly what this clearance means. You carry it alone." He didn't argue. There were things he couldn't say, even to her. The next morning, she sat across from Jonathan Webb, the FBI's deputy director, in a secure facility near Langley. He was meticulous, the kind of man who took notes on every breath. "The pattern matches," he said, sliding a series of photos across the table. "Kincaid was part of a cell operating inside the defense contractor network. We've identified 5 more suspects." Maya studied the faces. Ordinary. That was always the problem. Ordinary people doing extraordinary damage. "They look like analysts," she murmured. "They are," Webb said, "the kind who disappear in plain sight." Her gaze lingered on one face, a woman maybe in her 30s, smiling faintly in an ID photo. Did she know what she was part of? Maya asked. Maybe not at first. That was what hurt most, the knowledge that corruption didn't always start as betrayal. Sometimes it began as compromise. A favor, a secret shared in trust. Then slowly a fall. Webb leaned back. "You know, your checkpoint incident is what cracked this open. Without that exposure, we wouldn't have seen the pattern." Maya's lips curved slightly, so a failure became an advantage. He nodded. "Sometimes the system works that way." "Or sometimes," she said quietly, "the system breaks the right way." Webb gave her a look she'd seen before, curiosity mixed with respect and unease. He wanted to understand her. He never would. Over the following weeks, the investigation grew. More names, more interviews, more digital ghosts leading nowhere. Maya worked 12-hour days in isolation. No direct access to Pentagon terminals now, everything remote, compartmented. She built frameworks, analyzed cross-domain anomalies, tracked behavioral drift in encrypted communications. To others, it looked like code. To her, it was language, the unspoken rhythm of deceit. Her recommendations began reshaping national contractor policies. New oversight protocols, new classification tiers. Stone called it reform. Maya called it damage control. But the work came with a cost. The more she dove into the data, the less she recognized her own reflection. Her world had narrowed to screens, algorithms, and encrypted threads that led nowhere human. Some nights she'd pause mid-keystroke and realize hours had passed without memory of typing. She'd forgotten to eat, to breathe deeply, to feel anything. And yet there was pride buried in the fatigue. Quiet, unspoken pride. Because she was building something that mattered, something invisible and protective. Still, isolation wasn't sustainable. Stone saw it before she admitted it. "You need time away," he told her one afternoon during a secure video call. She shook her head. "I'm fine." "That's not a request. 2 weeks. No comms, no terminals, no work." She hesitated. "That's unnecessary." "That's an order, Commander." His voice carried the tone that ended arguments. Maya looked at him for a long moment, then sighed. "Understood." She spent those 2 weeks in Montana, no signal, no encrypted line, no mission. Just open air and silence. The first few days felt wrong, like her mind was still tethered to invisible data streams she couldn't touch. But slowly the noise faded. The static quieted, and something else emerged: stillness. She hiked during the day, read by lantern light at night. Watched rivers move without purpose, without orders. The simplicity unsettled her at first. Then it healed something she hadn't realized was wounded. She began to understand that silence didn't have to mean loneliness. Sometimes it meant presence, an acknowledgement that not everything valuable needed to be controlled. When she finally returned, her mind was clearer. For the first time in years, she slept without thinking of code or clearance. Waiting on her desk was a sealed message. New assignment, interested. Stone's signature below. She smiled faintly, always. Her new role wasn't in the field. It wasn't behind screens either. It was in a classroom, the National Defense University. She would train the next generation of analysts, not in theory but in instinct. How to see what others missed. How to remain unseen when it mattered. How to survive being invisible. Her first day felt strangely calm. Rows of students sat before her, sharp minds, fresh eyes. Some eager, some arrogant, most unaware of what they were about to learn. Security, she began, isn't about technology, it's about perception. People see what they expect to see. She told them a story, sanitized, of course, about a woman detained at a checkpoint because her badge didn't scan. She didn't say it was her. She didn't have to. The lesson was simple. Sometimes being questioned is proof that the system still works. As she spoke, she saw understanding flicker in their eyes. It wasn't excitement. It was respect, the kind that comes from realizing how fragile trust really is. One evening after class, Stone called again. "Guess who applied for your analyst program?" he said. "Who?" "Officer Patricia Wolfe." Maya smiled softly, the memory returning, the sharp-eyed officer who'd once accused her of forgery. "She cited you as her inspiration." "She's a good candidate," Maya said. "Would you take her?" "I already have." Months later, when Wolfe finally realized who her instructor really was, she froze mid-lecture. Maya simply smiled and said, "Coffee." They sat across from each other in a small cafe outside the base, two women bound by a misunderstanding that had changed both their lives. "You detained me because you saw something that didn't fit," Maya said gently. "That instinct is rare. Never lose it." Wolfe looked down. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. You did your job. The system worked." For the first time in a long time, Maya felt something close to peace, the quiet kind that doesn't announce itself. Years later, during a classified oral history interview, she was asked what level 9 really meant. She smiled faintly. "It means you stop existing publicly so others can keep living freely." The interviewer paused. "Do you ever regret it?" Maya thought for a long moment. "Sometimes," she said softly. "But then I remember the people who sleep peacefully at night don't know my name. That's the point." She looked past the recorder toward the windowless wall. "Exposure isn't always failure," she continued. "Sometimes it's opportunity. Sometimes it's the universe asking if you still remember who you are beneath the silence." The room stayed quiet for several seconds after she finished speaking. The interviewer whispered, almost reverently, "And what do you believe now?" Maya smiled small, knowing, tired. "I believe some heroes are meant to be forgotten, and the best of them never mind being unseen." Her voice lingered in the air like the last line of a song that doesn't fade, it just becomes silence. Because that was Maya Chen's world. Invisible, necessary. Built on trust that no one would ever speak her name. Why did teaching feel more dangerous than the missions ever did? Maya never expected to ask herself that question, but every time she walked into that classroom, full of bright eyes and quiet ambitions, she felt a different kind of weight settle on her shoulders. She had faced interrogation rooms, cold checkpoints, and encrypted wars fought in silence. None of them frightened her the way hope did. Because hope, in the wrong hands, could burn down everything she tried to protect. The National Defense University classroom smelled of coffee and determination. Screens flickered with digital maps and coded exercises, the modern battlefield rendered in pixels. Her students were sharp, too sharp sometimes. They analyzed like machines, but hadn't yet learned what she called human silence. That silence, the pause between data and decision, was what saved lives and destroyed them. Today's lesson wasn't in the syllabus. Maya had rewritten it at dawn, unable to shake the feeling that something was shifting again, subtle, invisible, familiar. She started class with a question. Why do you think intelligence fails? The room stilled. A hand went up, young man, early 20s, eager. Because of bad data. No, Maya said softly. Another student offered, because people ignore the data. Closer but not quite. She paused, scanning their faces. Intelligence fails, she said, because people see what they want to see, and systems, no matter how advanced, are built by people. Her tone was quiet, but the silence afterward was heavy. In that silence, truth had a way of cutting deeper than any lecture could. She continued, walking slowly between rows. The most dangerous mistakes I've ever seen didn't come from incompetence. They came from confidence, the belief that something couldn't possibly go wrong. Her gaze landed briefly on Officer Wolf. The younger woman sat near the back, notebook open, eyes alert, disciplined, but softer now. Humility had reshaped her in quiet ways. After class, when the students filed out, Wolf lingered. "Ma'am," she said carefully, "can I ask you something off the record?" Maya nodded. "Do you ever stop seeing threats, even when there aren't any?" The question wasn't academic. It was personal. Maya saw the faint tension in Wolf's hands, the sleeplessness she recognized from her own reflection years ago. "No," Maya said quietly. "You don't stop seeing them. You just learn which ones deserve your fear." Wolf exhaled, half laugh, half confession. "Then how do you sleep?" "You don't," Maya said. "You just rest between alarms." That night, long after the building emptied, Maya sat alone in her office. The lights from the corridor bled through the frosted glass, soft and ghost-like. She stared at a classified brief on her desk, a report she wasn't supposed to see, but someone had sent it to her anonymously. No header, no signature, just 2 lines. Pattern anomaly, clearance mismatch, possible leak inside training network. Her pulse slowed. Training network. Her program. She leaned back, her thoughts threading through possibilities. Was it a warning, a test, a trap? She didn't know, but the instinct that had saved her life countless times, that low hum of intuition, told her this wasn't random. She closed the report, eyes distant. Some shadows didn't stay buried, they waited. 2 days later, she received confirmation. A background audit flagged irregular credential pings from one of her own terminals. The IP trail was clean, too clean. Like someone who knew she would check. Wolf knocked on her office door, just as Maya was reviewing the logs. "Ma'am, you wanted to see me." "Yes, sit down." Wolf obeyed, expression steady but curious. Maya turned the screen toward her. "Does this mean anything to you?" Wolf leaned in. "It's my workstation ID, but those timestamps, I wasn't even on base then." "I know." "Then someone cloned my access." Maya nodded, or wanted it to look that way. Wolf's voice dropped. "You think I'm being set up?" "I think someone's probing for weaknesses, and they picked the one person who's been under a microscope before. Wolf swallowed. Me. You, Maya confirmed, which means they're not testing you, they're testing me. For the first time since joining the program, Wolf saw something in Maya's face she hadn't seen before, not fear, exactly, but weariness. The kind that comes when the past refuses to stay where you left it. Permission to ask freely, ma'am. Granted. Why you? Why keep targeting you after all these years? Maya considered that for a long moment. Because I'm proof the system can't be controlled, she said quietly. And people who can't be controlled make certain kinds of enemies. That night, she reviewed every layer of the breach herself. Whoever had accessed Wolf's credentials was using older encryption, legacy coding only known to a handful of people. People like her. And like Rachel Kincaid. Maya froze. Kincaid had been in custody for over a year. But what if she hadn't worked alone even then? The thought pulled her back to the briefing rooms, to the words Webb once said, "Cells replicate even after you think they're dead." Maybe this was replication. A new cell. A ghost of the old one. She opened an encrypted channel to General Stone. "Sir, it's Chen." His voice came tired but alert. "Talk to me. We may have an infiltration attempt inside the analyst program." "You're sure?" "Not yet, but the patterns match the Kincaid breach, same precision, same concealment strategy." Stone was silent for several seconds. "Lock it down, no digital trace, keep it off the grid." "Already done." Before ending the call, his tone softened. "Maya, be careful. If they're inside your network, you might not just be the target, you might be the test." She didn't reply right away. "I understand, sir." Days turned into weeks. Classes continued, reports circulated. The breach faded from conversation, but not from her mind. She had seen too many ghosts resurrect themselves under new names. Her students noticed the change in her, the sharper tone, the measured pauses. She smiled less, spoke slower. Every lesson began to sound like a warning wrapped in wisdom. One afternoon, during a simulation exercise, Wolf approached her. "Ma'am, I think I found something odd in the network log." Maya raised an eyebrow. "Define odd." "The access ID. It's mine again, but this time it's embedded in a decoy file." "What kind of file?" "A training brief titled Legacy Oversight Protocols." Maya's pulse quickened. That file title shouldn't exist anywhere outside the Level 9 archive. She had created it years ago, during her time under the old clearance system. "Where did you find it?" she asked. "Sandbox server, low priority, almost like someone wanted it noticed." "A trap." "It had to be." "But for who?" Maya looked at Wolf carefully. "You did well bringing it to me. Don't discuss this with anyone." "Yes, ma'am." When Wolf left, Maya opened the decoy file. Inside wasn't data. It was a single phrase, burned into the metadata like a whisper. "You can't erase a legacy." Her hands stilled on the keyboard. The room seemed to shrink around her, the air heavier. She knew that phrase. It had been used in one of Kincaid's encrypted drops before her capture. Someone was reviving the old network. Someone who wanted her to see it. That night, as she drove home through a quiet DC rain, her thoughts looped like the windshield wipers across glass. What if this wasn't an attack on the system, but a message to her personally? The car's dashboard glowed dimly in the dark. Outside, the rain blurred streetlights into gold streaks, like ghosts of memories sliding by. Every operative has an unfinished story. She had believed hers was over. But maybe, just maybe, the past wasn't done testing her. As she turned onto the narrow road leading to her apartment complex, her encrypted phone vibrated once. No caller ID, no trace. One line appeared on the screen before it vanished. Level 9s don't retire, they just fade until called again. Maya parked, staring at the empty street through the windshield. She felt the faintest tremor of something she hadn't felt in years. Not fear. Recognition. Because whoever sent that message wasn't just reaching out from the shadows. They were already inside them, waiting for her to step back in. Why did she come back? The question echoed through her head as she stood in the rain outside Fort Meade, watching the security lights blur across the wet asphalt. 2 months earlier, she'd promised herself she was done with field work. Now the promise felt naive, like peace had been a temporary disguise she'd borrowed from someone else. Inside, the corridor smelled of coffee, ozone, and fatigue. The night shift analysts barely looked up as Maya passed, her new credentials glowing faintly under the scanner. Different badge, same authority. Her footsteps were soundless, deliberate. Stone was waiting in a briefing room, lit only by the glow of a single monitor. He didn't waste time on greetings. "You got the message?" "Yes." "You trace it?" "Impossible. Whoever sent it used a relay built from an internal training sandbox. That's our own infrastructure." He exhaled slowly, the sound of someone realizing the enemy might not be outside the gates. "So it's internal." "It's personal," Maya corrected. "They referenced level 9. That phrase isn't in any current directory. Only someone who served under the legacy system would even know it existed." Stone nodded. "We're pulling access logs from the old archive. I want you to oversee it." "Sir, that archive is sealed." "Not anymore." He tapped a code into the terminal. A screen flickered to life, dark interface, obsolete design, the digital relic of another era. Across the top read, "Special Access Program Legacy Clearance Registry." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The last time she'd seen that screen was the day she was inducted, the day her public identity had died quietly so a hidden one could live. Stone looked at her carefully. Who else could have access? Technically, no one. Practically, anyone who helped build the firewall. That was 10 years ago. "So we start with the architects." Maya nodded, eyes on the names scrolling down the monitor. Most were retired, a few dead, 2 unaccounted for. The next morning, she drove south toward Quantico. The sun was barely above the horizon. The Potomac glimmered like polished metal. The file on the passenger seat contained one of the missing names. Eli Harper, former cybersecurity architect, presumed retired after a breakdown. She found him living in a cabin miles from anywhere, gray beard, glassy eyes. A man who'd seen too much data and not enough daylight. He recognized her instantly. "I wonder when they'd send you," he said. She studied him. "Someone accessed the legacy system." He laughed once, brittle. "I told them the ghosts would come back." "Who else has the keys?" "Keys?" He smiled sadly. "There are no keys anymore, just doors we forgot we left open." He reached for a box under his table and pulled out an old external drive wrapped in duct tape. "I kept a backup," he admitted. "Not for betrayal, for memory." Maya hesitated. "You realize that's a felony." "I realize it's the only proof you'll get." He slid it across the table. "Whoever's inside your network isn't stealing data. They're rebuilding something, a mirror of the old system. Legacy 10, maybe." She froze. "That's impossible." "So was level 9 once." Before she could ask more, he added softly, "You think the system forgets, Maya, but systems don't forget. They evolve." She left him there, his warning echoing long after the cabin disappeared in her rearview mirror. Back at Langley, she and Webb examined the contents of Harper's drive in a sealed analysis room. Most of the data was harmless, old frameworks, encryption keys, program notes. But buried deep was a set of new connection protocols, Timestamps only a week old. This wasn't archived, Webb said, frowning. It's active. Maya leaned closer. The code referenced something called L-mirror. What's mirror? Webb shook his head. Not in any database. Maya traced the routing path. It looped back through a defense subcontractor hub, Crystal City again. Same pattern. Same ghost. She closed the terminal. Someone's rebuilding the legacy network under a new name. Mirror isn't just code, it's recruitment. Webb frowned. Recruitment. Yes, if you wanted to find people with the skills and the temperament to run a program like Legacy 9, where would you look? He understood immediately. The training program. My students, Maya said. That night she sat in her office long after midnight, the only light coming from the desk lamp. Outside, the campus was silent, except for distant rain tapping against windows. Her thoughts moved like static. Could one of her students be working for whoever resurrected Mirror? Or worse, were they being used without realizing it? A knock at the door broke her concentration. It was Wolf. Ma'am, you're still here. So are you. Wolf hesitated. I've found something you should see. She handed over a flash drive. I ran a trace on the decoy file metadata like you asked. There's a secondary author signature embedded beneath the checksum. Maya plugged it in. The screen displayed a single tag, E. Harper, followed by a string of coordinates. Her pulse quickened. He's alive. I thought he was retired, Wolf said. So did I. The coordinates pointed to the same remote area near Quantico where she'd just been. Which meant either Harper had hidden the signature years ago, or someone was impersonating him now. Maya leaned back slowly. Either way, we're not alone in this. The next day, Stone authorized a covert audit of the training network. Maya watched the analysts work from behind a glass wall, rows of screens reflecting in her eyes like fragments of another life. When the results came back, one detail chilled her. The infiltration points matched the personal login times of 3 of her top students. Wolf among them. Stone's voice was calm but heavy. You have to consider the possibility. No, Maya said immediately. She's being used, I know her. So did you know Kincaid once? The words landed harder than he meant them to. Maya turned away, staring at the rows of silent screens. How do you protect something when the enemy learns from your own methods? She whispered. Stone didn't answer. He didn't have one. That evening, she found Wolf waiting outside her building. The young officer looked pale, her usual composure cracked. They suspended my access, Wolf said quietly. They think it's me. Maya motioned her inside. Once the door closed, Wolf spoke fast. I swear I didn't do anything, but whoever's behind this, they're using my signature again. It's like they're one step ahead every time. Maya poured her a glass of water. They're not ahead, they're inside. Inside what? Inside our assumptions. Wolf looked at her, confused and desperate. So what do? We make them believe they've won. For the next 48 hours, they built a trap. Maya created a dummy dataset, a fake clearance registry marked as Legacy 10. They let it sit inside the training network, unguarded but traceable. Then they waited. At 2:13 a.m. the bait was taken. A remote user accessed the file for exactly 45 seconds before disconnecting. Maya tracked the signal. Not Crystal City this time, Washington, D.C. downtown. She pulled up the coordinates. It wasn't a contractor site. It was a government building. The Office of Strategic Technology, a division that officially didn't exist. Her stomach tightened. She called Stone. Sir, we've got movement. Location. OSD headquarters. They're inside our own infrastructure. Stone's silence was the kind that meant confirmation. They always were, he said quietly. Mirror was never external. It's a contingency program built to replace Legacy 9 if it ever failed. Maya's voice dropped to a whisper. So we're the redundancy. Exactly. For a moment she couldn't speak. All the ghosts, all the warnings, they weren't attacks. They were signals from within, testing whether she was still loyal to a system that had already evolved beyond her. By dawn, the trap was closed. They traced the breach back to a single internal node, someone high enough to authorize Mirror's activation. The name appeared on her screen. Her breath caught. General Marcus Stone. The system didn't lie. The timestamps were real. The authorization codes his. Maya stared at the data, disbelief warring with something darker, understanding. He wasn't betraying them. He was continuing them. Legacy 9 hadn't been dissolved. It had been replaced. By his hand. She closed the laptop slowly, her heartbeat steady despite the storm rising inside her. Loyalty wasn't supposed to question. But conscience wasn't built to obey. The rain started again outside, soft against the glass. She whispered to the empty room. Sometimes, the ghosts we chase are just the reflections of those we trusted. How do you confront a man who taught you loyalty? The question followed her down the corridor like a shadow. Maya walked fast, badge clipped, eyes unreadable. The building's hum was familiar, the steady pulse of servers, the low drone of recycled air. But tonight it sounded different, as if the walls themselves were listening. She reached the secure elevator, swiped her clearance, and waded through the long descent. Below ground, light shifted from fluorescent white to muted amber, the color of secrecy. When the doors opened, General Stone was already there. He didn't look surprised. "I thought you'd come," he said. Maya stepped out. "You built Mirror." He didn't deny it. "I built a safeguard. By recreating the same system you once swore you dismantle." Stone folded his hands behind his back, the gesture of a man used to explaining strategy, not guilt. Legacy 9 was a necessary lie, he said. Mirror is the truth, a decentralized intelligence lattice, no single failure point, no individual exposure. You should appreciate the evolution. Her voice was calm, but the weight behind it could cut steel. You used my students. You turned training data into recruitment metrics. They volunteered indirectly. They trusted me. They trusted the mission. Maya shook her head slowly. That's not the same thing. Stone's expression softened, almost paternal. Maya, systems outgrow their makers. You taught them invisibility. I'm simply giving it structure. She stared at him, searching for the man who'd once defended her at that checkpoint, who'd lectured others about judgment and restraint. All she saw now was purpose without mercy. You're playing God with ghosts, she said. I'm preventing chaos. By replacing it with obedience. His jaw tightened. You of all people should understand compromise. Maya took a slow breath. Compromise built this place, but conscience kept it from collapsing. Later in her apartment, she sat in darkness, the city lights carving thin bars across her face. The flash drive with Stone's authorization codes lay on the table, its presence louder than any sound. She could expose him. But to whom? The oversight committee was blind by design. The press would never see proof. Everything about her life existed in silence. Every victory erased itself the moment it was achieved. The moral lines blurred until only intent remained. And intent, she realized, was just a weapon waiting for direction. She poured herself a glass of water and watched the condensation bead down the side. In another life, she might have been ordinary. Now she measured honesty in encryption keys and betrayals in megabytes. Her phone vibrated once, an encrypted pulse. A single phrase appeared before the message auto-deleted. Do you still believe in the mission? No signature, but she knew the cadence. Stone. She closed her eyes. Belief was dangerous. It made people predictable. And predictable people were easy to control. The next morning, she went back to the base. Routine calm. That was the trick. Move as though nothing had shifted, even when the ground was gone beneath you. Wolf met her outside the training wing. Ma'am, you okay? You didn't answer comms last night. I needed quiet. Wolf hesitated. They said the investigation's closed. Mirror been contained. Maya smiled faintly. Contained doesn't mean gone. Wolf frowned. You think they're still running it? I think it was never meant to stop. She placed a small sealed envelope in Wolf's hand. If anything happens to me, give this to Director Webb. What's inside? Insurance. Wolf's voice trembled. You sound like you're leaving. I'm finishing something. At 2200 hours, Maya walked back into the same secure level where Mirror had been born. Only one camera still worked. She disabled it with a single command. Stone was there again, standing before a wall of monitors filled with mirrored code. Maya, he said quietly, you shouldn't be here. Neither should this. She stepped closer, the glow of the screens painting both their faces in shifting blue. Do you even know what you've built? She asked. It's self-regulating, self-learning, the closest thing to incorruptible intelligence we've ever had. It's autonomous. It's efficient. Efficient doesn't mean moral, she said. You removed human oversight. I removed human error. For a moment they just stood there, the architect and the creation, mentor and student, two halves of the same paradox. Then Maya said quietly, you taught me to escalate when I see something I don't understand. I did. I'm escalating. Before he could respond, she inserted a drive into the master console. A kill string appeared across the monitors. Stone's voice sharpened. What did you do? Mirrors break, she said. That's their nature. Lines of code began to unravel, systems collapsing into digital silence. He moved toward her. Maya, stop. Tell me one thing first, she whispered. Was any of this about protection or just control? His reply was almost lost in the static. There's no difference anymore. The screens went dark. Hours later, she sat on the steps outside the building, dawn bleeding into the sky. Sirens echoed somewhere distant, containment teams cleaning up the fallout she'd triggered. She didn't know what would happen next. Wolf appeared breathless. What did you do? Maya looked up. Reset the board. They're saying Stone been taken into custody. For what? For saving his system from you. Maya laughed once, soft and tired. That sounds about right. Wolf sat beside her. So was it worth it? She asked. Maya watched the sunrise, thin, uncertain light spreading over a city built on secrets. Maybe, she said, maybe not. Wolf turned toward her. What happens now? Maya's answer was almost a whisper. Now we start over, quietly, smarter, without forgetting why we began. They sat in silence as the light grew stronger. Cars moved, birds scattered, the world resumed. Somewhere inside, files were being rewritten, stories erased, names replaced by new ones. But for a brief, fragile moment, Maya allowed herself to feel something close to peace. Not triumph. Just release. That evening, alone in her apartment, she recorded one last encrypted message. To whoever finds this archive, systems will always fail. People will always rebuild them. The only question that matters is whether the next version remembers what the last one forgot. She pressed send. Then she turned off every light and sat in the dark, letting the silence fill the room until it became almost beautiful. Because sometimes, ending a system isn't destruction. It's mercy. And sometimes, the bravest thing a soldier can do is walk away, knowing no one will ever know what she saved. Why did the silence feel heavier now that the war was over? Maybe because wars fought in secret never truly ended. Maya Chen woke before dawn, the way she always had, alert before her alarm, heartbeat steady before memory caught up. For a moment she didn't know where she was. The unfamiliar ceiling, the soft hum of an air purifier, the scent of new paint. Then it came back, temporary housing. A quiet suburb on the edge of Arlington, under an alias she hadn't chosen. The agency called it protective reassignment. She called it exile with benefits. She moved through her morning with ritual precision: coffee, water, window check, encrypted message scan. Nothing. The absence of alerts was the only proof she still existed. On the third day, a plain envelope arrived. No return address, no markings. Inside was a single photograph. A sunrise reflected off glass, the Pentagon's west entrance. And beneath it, one sentence handwritten. Mirrors break, but reflections linger. No signature. She didn't need one. Stone was alive. 3 months passed before she saw him again. The meeting wasn't official. They both knew better. They met at a small veteran cemetery outside Quantico, where silence carried further than conversation. Stone's uniform was gone. He wore a plain jacket and carried the stillness of someone who'd seen too much of both victory and consequence. He placed a single white flower on an unmarked grave, then turned. Maya. General. They stood facing each other, mentor and student, architect and dissenter. I didn't expect to hear from you, she said. I needed to see if you were still out there. I am barely. He nodded once. You were right. About what? Control. I built Mirror to protect the system from corruption. Instead, I made it need me. That's how corruption begins. I know. The wind moved softly through the trees. Somewhere, a flag rustled against its pole. You saved us from something worse, he said quietly. You mean you, she replied. He gave a faint smile. Sometimes those are the same thing. For a long time, neither spoke. Finally, she asked, what happens to the program? Officially, it never existed. Unofficially, it's dormant, waiting. For what? For someone with enough sense not to repeat our mistakes. He started to walk away but paused. You ever think about teaching again? Always, she said. Then teach them why we fell. When he was gone, she stood alone among rows of names carved into stone, some remembered, most forgotten. She whispered to no one, that's the problem. No one ever learns until it's too late. Weeks later, she reappeared quietly at the National Defense University. Different name on the roster. Different department. Same mission. Her new title, Consultant, Ethical Analysis in Covert Systems. The irony wasn't lost on her. On her first day, a student raised a hand. Ma'am, is it true that some programs operate completely off the record? Maya smiled softly. The more invisible something is, the louder its consequences tend to be. They laughed, not realizing she wasn't joking. She taught differently now. Slower, with pauses long enough for reflection to sink in. Her lectures weren't about code or classification anymore. They were about choices. About the small decisions that ripple into history no one will ever write. One afternoon, she found Wolf waiting outside her office. The younger woman looked calmer, grounded, her eyes clearer than Maya remembered. They reinstated me, Wolf said almost shyly. I heard, Maya said. They said you vouched for me. I told them you had the one quality the system can't train. What's that? Conscience. Wolf smiled faintly. And you? Maya looked at her desk, empty, except for a single notebook. I'm still figuring out if mine's a blessing or a liability. Wolf hesitated, then said, "You did the right thing, ma'am. Right doesn't always mean safe. Still worth it." Maya looked out the window at the courtyard below, where students walked without ever looking up. "Yes," she said quietly, "still worth it." Later that evening, as the campus emptied, she sat alone in the classroom. The screens were off, the lights dim. Her reflection in the glass was faint, ghost-like. She opened the old notebook, the same one she'd carried during the level 9 years. Inside were fragments of notes, unfinished thoughts, questions she'd never dared to answer. She added a new line. "What does loyalty mean when truth has no home?" She stared at the words until they blurred. There was no clear answer. There never had been. At 1:00 a.m., her encrypted tablet buzzed. One message, unknown sender. Legacy network reconstruction authorized. Advisory requested. Her breath caught. The program was coming back, rebranded, restructured, reborn. The cycle beginning again. She typed a single response. "Proceed with caution. Remember, systems forget faster than people bleed." She hit send, then powered the device off. For a long time she just sat there, listening to the hum of the lights. Outside, the sky was starting to lighten. Sometimes she wondered what it would be like to live an ordinary life, one without codes, secrets, or ghosts. Then she realized she wouldn't know what to do with peace if it ever arrived. Maybe peace wasn't the absence of war. Maybe it was learning how to breathe inside one. A week later, she gave her final lecture for the term. Her students watched her closely, the quiet authority, the stillness between sentences. "If you take nothing else from this course," she said softly, "take this. Integrity isn't what you do when people are watching. It's what you choose when the world will never know." She paused, scanning the room, eyes of future analysts, soldiers, operators, watchers. Some would become protectors. Some would become ghosts. And maybe, years from now, one of them would remember this moment and hesitate before making a choice that would save or destroy something unseen. That was enough. When class ended, she stood by the window, watching the students disappear into the morning. Their reflections slid across the glass like moving light. For the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible, just unseen by choice. And there was a difference. That night she sat on her balcony, coffee in hand, city lights shimmering in the distance. The world kept spinning, oblivious. Files were still classified. Secrets still buried. But somewhere out there, a few people still cared enough to guard the quiet spaces between lies and truth. She took a slow breath and whispered into the night. "Some battles end, others just change form. But the ones worth fighting never need to be seen." The wind carried her words away, scattering them like dust into the city below. And for the first time in a long while, Maya Chen smiled, not because she was free, but because she'd finally learned what freedom meant. It wasn't leaving the shadows. It was learning to live within them, without becoming one. How does someone like her end a story that was never meant to be told? That question had followed Maya for years, through secure channels, interrogation rooms, and the endless, humming silence of classified halls. Now, sitting in a dimly lit archive room deep beneath the National Defense University, she finally had time to think. Not to work. Not to run. Just think. The air smelled faintly of paper and cold metal, the scent of memory. Around her, sealed boxes lined the walls, marked with cryptic codes and faded clearance tags. Each one held the fragments of decisions that shaped lives, and sometimes ended them. She placed a small folder on the table. No digital trail, no encryption. Just ink on paper. Her handwriting, measured, deliberate, traced the outline of everything she had once buried. It wasn't confession. It was preservation. Inside were documents describing the birth of Legacy 9, the evolution into Mirror, and the corruption that followed. Names were redacted. Motive wasn't. At the top of the first page, she had written a single line. "The system forgets, we shouldn't." Outside, morning light filtered through reinforced glass. The world above moved in ignorance, students walking to class, soldiers preparing for briefings, analysts scrolling through screens they would never truly understand. She spent half her life protecting them, and the other half making sure they'd never have to know from what. Some days that felt like purpose. Other days it felt like punishment. She closed the folder, slid it into a locked drawer, and sealed it under a new classification tag: Ethics Archive, Access Level Undefined. The label was intentionally paradoxical. Undefined meant no one could open it without rewriting the rules to do so. That was her last firewall, not code but conscience. Later that afternoon, she took a walk across the campus lawn. Students nodded politely, not knowing who she really was, or what her quiet presence had once cost. She liked it that way. A soft wind moved through the trees, carrying the scent of rain and cut grass. Ordinary, beautiful. She let it fill her lungs. Every now and then, fragments of the past surfaced. The red scanner light, Wolf's trembling hands, Stone's weary eyes. Moments replayed not as guilt, but as reminders. They weren't scars anymore. They were proof she'd survived the kind of war that didn't make headlines. At dusk, she returned to her apartment, a small space overlooking the city. The horizon glowed orange, fading into blue. She stood by the window, coffee in hand, watching the traffic move like quiet circuits of life. Her secure phone buzzed once, a single encrypted ping. Unknown sender. No message. Just coordinates: 38.872 minus 77.056. She smiled faintly. The Pentagon. The same entrance where it had all begun. The next morning she went there, not under her alias, not in disguise. Just herself. The security line was shorter than she remembered. New scanners, new personnel. Different world, same rhythm. She approached the checkpoint calmly, placing her ID in the tray. The young officer scanned it. A clean tone, green light. "Welcome back, ma'am," he said. She smiled gently, "Thank you." He didn't know who she was. And that, she realized, was the point. As she walked through, she glanced toward the far corner, the secondary screening area where years ago, suspicion had nearly rewritten her life. The barriers were gone now. The space open, quiet, ordinary. Sometimes progress didn't look like innovation. Sometimes it looked like the absence of fear. She rode the elevator up to a floor she hadn't seen in years. When the doors opened, she found a small exhibit, new, understated, titled "Unsung Architects of Security." Photographs of analysts, engineers, linguists, operatives. No names, just faces. Her breath caught when she saw one of them, a blurred image from a briefing years ago. Her profile caught mid-sentence. No caption. No context. She stood there for a long time, neither proud nor hidden. Just present. Then she whispered to the air, "That's enough." That evening she sat again at her desk, writing one final message. To the next generation. You will inherit systems you didn't build. And mistakes you didn't make. Don't worship either. Build better ones. Trust carefully. Question quietly. And remember, silence isn't weakness. It's the space where truth decides if it's ready to be heard. She saved the note, encrypted it under no clearance at all, public domain. One day maybe it would surface in a lecture, or on a forgotten forum post. Maybe someone would read it and never know who wrote it. That was fine. Her name didn't matter anymore. Only the lesson did. As night fell, the city shimmered below, windows flickering like coded stars. Somewhere deep inside the network she'd once dismantled, fragments of mirror still existed. She knew that. She also knew she couldn't chase every ghost forever. She whispered softly, half to herself, half to the silence that had always listened. Let them rebuild, just let them remember. The wind stirred through the open window, cool and clean. The kind of air that only comes after a storm. She leaned back, eyes closed. And for the first time since she'd been level 9, Maya Chen wasn't watching for threats. She was watching for peace. Outside, dawn began to rise again over Washington, another day starting in a city that would never know her story. Somewhere, a young analyst would swipe their badge, a soldier would report for duty, a student would open their laptop, believing the world was held together by systems and codes. They weren't wrong, but it was also held together by something quieter, people like Maya, whose choices no one would ever record. Her story didn't end with recognition. It ended exactly where it began. In silence. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.